My name is Herman Schaalman. I have a middle initial of E for Ezra, and I'm 94 and a half years old. It's a 7-day-a-week job, and you're available to people who need you for 24 hours, so you can get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning that somebody is in trouble and wakes you up. But basically, the job of a rabbi is to be a teacher. I teach, for instance, in 2 Christian seminaries, Chicago Theological Seminary on the campus of the University of Chicago, where they've established a chair in my honor in Jewish studies. And then for the last 54 years, I've taught and am still teaching at Garrett Theological Seminary at Northwestern University. And then, of course, I've been very active in interfaith matters, in Christian-Jewish relations, and relations with Muslim and Jewish groups and so forth. So when in 1956 I was called to be the rabbi of Emmanuel, that was one of the great moments in my then young life. Since then, of course, there have been any number of events, but one that you might be most interested in is my friendship with the late Cardinal Bernardin. I don't even remember anymore how that friendship originated. My best recollection is that he began reaching out to me. We had met somehow at meetings of some type of, and I got a call from him to come and visit with him. At any rate, in the last 7-8 years of his cardinalate here, we were very, very close friends, to the point that when he knew that he was dying and had flown to Rome to say goodbye to the Pope, in the aeroplane on the way back, he designated and detailed every arrangement of his funeral, which was to be a 3-day lying in state. And after he came here, one of his priests called me and said that the cardinal requested that I conduct a funeral for on behalf of the Jewish community on the 2nd day of his lying in state in the cathedral. Well, this was so startling a request of me that I asked for some time to think it over, because, there are rabbis even to this day who would not enter a church, let alone participate in any religious event in which they might be involved. But I finally decided, after consulting some of my friends and colleagues, that this was an extraordinary not only request, but opportunity to demonstrate something of the sort to which I had devoted so much of my own life, namely the improvement of relations in interfaith communities, interfaith activities. And so I did organize a service kind of memorial for my dear departed friend on Tuesday afternoon. And I would say, really, in terms of my rabbinic activities, this has been an unsurpassed high point. Another thing that I did with my life, which to this day is one of the most important of my current activities, is that I founded a camp for young people and adults to study Judaism. It's in southern Wisconsin, and it has grown from a first enrollment of 38 young people to over 1,000 each summer now. And it is one of the most marvelous facts of my life that I was able to initiate that project, even though it has grown way beyond anything I started or even envisaged. Of course, I must say to you, one of the main motivations that I've had all along, quite apart from any other consideration, is the fact that I came to the conclusion that if there had been a better relationship between the Christian majority and the tiny Jewish minority in Germany, then maybe the plague and insanity of the Nazis could not have happened. I don't know whether that is a valid conclusion, but to me it makes some sense, because I have found here, especially in Chicago, such a readiness to be engaged in conversations, in dialogue, in exploring each other's lives and commitments and values, that I must say to you that I feel so different than I ever could have felt in Europe anywhere, certainly in Germany when I grew up, that I'm convinced that work of this type, bringing people of different positions and different commitments to speak to each other, to get to know each other, maybe even to like each other, because that often happens as a result, is really not only inherently good, but is also a protection against the kind of prejudice, hatred, discrimination, injustice, whatever it would be that would plague society. I had a rather nice voice when I was young and was liked to chant, liked to sing. Both my parents had good voices, and there was always music in our home when I grew up. So that sound was a continuous accompaniment of my development as a human being. But I pretty soon thereafter came to understand that sound, especially when it came to my Jewish tradition, was so central and so effective that I became aware of the fact that sound, especially in the expression of my Jewish religious life, is indispensable. Let me put it this way. When I read Torah, I'm continuously aware of the fact that God is represented as speaking. There are no images of God in Judaism, so the visual aspect of deity is really almost totally absent, is maybe actually repressed. Judaism is totally wedded to the notion that the only way God and humans can in any sense relate is through sound. And therefore, of course, my ancestors who wrote, our ancestors who wrote the Torah, are speaking continuously in terms of speaking, hearing, paying attention, and so forth. And when I was thinking about that, there are a number of things that occurred to me. First of all, I think I know, and I think you as a physician can certainly confirm that in a way that I am not able to, and that is that a baby in a mother's womb is subject to noise and not to any visual capacity. In fact, it takes a baby a day or two or three to become a seer. On the other hand, the mother's body is like a musical instrument. There's blood running, there are joints creaking, there's digestion happening, so that the fetus, from the earliest moments of its capacity to receive, is subject to sound. And I also know from similar reading that the last sound that leaves a person at death, is the sense of sound. There may be no other way any longer that anyone can respond, but sound can still enter the moribund. Well, quite apart from that, which is, of course, in itself already a very powerful argument, sound has a quality to it that, to my mind, is the absolute necessary component to becoming human. Sound needs another, because sound makes no sense unless there is a receiver, a hearer. So sound is always dialogic. Vision can be solipsistic. I don't need anybody to see anything. In fact, I might be disturbed by other people when I want to see something. But when I want to make a sound, I always expect that there's somebody who hears, or else the sound really is useless, is futile. So inherently, in my definition of what a human being might be and could be, sound is indispensable because it brings us in relationship. To put it really boldly, I can't be who I could be if I were all alone. I need others to be who I want to be and could be. So, in other words, to me, sound is not just a gift and some kind of an endowment by a beneficent creator. It is my best tool to become who I might become and ought to become. It is necessary for people to interact. And to me, the best and easiest way of interacting is by way of voice. There are other ways of interacting. I know touch or sight, they are not totally inoperative or unnecessary. But I think the most effective and the one that is most readily available is sound. When I can speak to someone, then the relationship begins in which there is a continuous give and take. And that is, to my mind, the most important, necessary component of forming a community. So in many different ways, everything that I have ever found for myself and for my reading of history or theology or whatever, that seemed to me to be both important and effective, really depends primarily on sound, on the capacity to speak. Sound has a life and an intent, and therefore a destiny of its own. If you hear a certain sound, there's nothing you can do with it. The sound is sovereign. The sound has its own power. It is not that dependent, as is the word, upon the receiver, upon the other. And therefore I think the use of sound to build bridges, to establish connections, is a fabulous method and probably the best chance that we have to achieve what you and a few of us hope to achieve, namely to create a more peaceful and decent world. The purpose of being in relation is to avoid wounds or to heal whatever is wounded, is to straighten out what is twisted, is to bring some kind of harmony where there is a clash. So I would say, yes, the functioning of sound could well be understood and is easily recognized as being a healing agent. And I would say that I have read articles by people who use sound, especially for certain types of diseases or certain types of difficulties that people face. People that have certain deficiencies in terms of the nervous system or their emotional conditions can very often be treated and reached by sound in a much more direct and effective way than maybe by any other means. I also know this much, that our first child, our daughter, Susan, after she was born, had an allergy. And she had difficulty breathing and sleeping and being quiet. And I found by accident, and then used it, that if I put her on my chest and would croon in the deepest bass voice that I could, without words, just she fell asleep almost instantaneously. And she was quiet, and her breathing began to be relaxed and restored. So I know that sounds can be healers, yes. When Madame Shakira had first told me about this idea that she was hatching about sounds of faith, and it was in your home, and I remember we were sitting around a table, and I was telling you then about my ideas that about the origin and power of sound, especially as far as the Jewish community was concerned. It became quite clear to me then thereafter, when I listened to you and listened to others who had become engaged with you in this project, that it has a tremendous appeal. Somehow or other, this is ingenious on your part. And you see already the results of it. The fact that you've been invited to do concerts in sacred spaces that are not your own and would not be your own choice, but people having heard about it or have been induced by you to give you a chance to do this, are making their sanctuaries available to you, which is to me the proof positive that you are onto something that has enormous potential. There may be nothing in the interfaith movement that is so ultimately capable of eliminating prejudgment and fixed prepositions which need to be somehow taken away and chased away in order for real understanding to occur. Your notion that it is the sounds of faith that are the most reliable and possibly permanent bridge between the various components of religious communities the world over. It is not just the Abrahamic ones. This would also go for others. Is not only ingenious, I really think it is powerful.